Samara is an interesting character, one who I feel isn't underrated, but rather underappreciated. In my experience, there's pretty much a universal consensus on her. She's a pretty good character. Not up there with the greats, but certainly not bad. Everyone likes her, but nobody really adores her. And that's why I think she's underappreciated, even if we all collectively agree that she's good. There are so many nuances and little things about her character and story that make it all come together. But it's a lot tougher to analyze what makes something work as opposed to what makes something fail. Because of that, I see a lot more discussion of her daughter, Morinth, a character with a quarter of the screen time and 10th of the depth of her mother. But hey, a bad character is easier to dissect, so let's start there. Morinth sucks. She's a companion, but is so pointless and flat that we've pretty much collectively agreed that she doesn't count for the purposes of discussing squad mates. She makes Jacob seem like an open book. There is no diving deep into her character here. To get her in your squad, you have to help her kill Samara. The big thing is that there is absolutely no reason to do this. Samara is loyal to you, no less powerful than Morinth, and most importantly, she's not a serial-killing sexual predator. If you make this choice, Morinth pretends to be Samara, and her only reasoning for staying around is that she wants to sleep with Shepard. However, it is absolutely hilarious that you can take her up on that post-game, and it instantly kills you. She is a shallow character that brings very little to the table. And then, in Mass Effect 3, she's relegated to an email and a named Banshee. The fact that there was no outcry over a full squad mate being done such a disservice shows how little people cared for her. Now, this may be a controversial take, but I don't think she's a case of missed potential. Let's say that I could hit a button and suddenly Morinth is a properly fleshed out character with nuance and depth. Even if it would magically take 0 resources away from the rest of the game, I don't think I'd press it. Because if you gave Morinth that nuance, you would ruin Samara's character arc. The thing about Samara is that her story is a composition of a massive amount of smaller writing choices which all come together into a great character, and even a small adjustment to that formula could wreck it. Let's rewind a bit. What exactly is Samara's story? Mass Effect 2 is a game about building up your team, and once you enter the game's second act, you're given your second batch of recruitment missions consisting of Tali, Thane, and Samara. You know Tali already, and Thane is introduced as an assassin, so you've got a picture in your head of what he's like. But Samara is listed as a Justicar, which seems to be some kind of Asari that fights good. You really have no idea what to expect. And then, as you look for her, the characters who point you in her direction are absolutely terrified of her. I've said in the past that a good exposition dump should be information that it makes sense for the characters to impart, and these dialogues get that exactly right. Since the Justicars are an isolated and ruthless order unique to the Asari, these people are terrified of her presence causing a diplomatic incident, so they are very eager to explain to you, a human, what she does. They rightfully assume you know absolutely nothing about Justicars and are making sure that you are aware of what you're getting into by looking for one. They don't want you to go and get yourself killed by her. They tell you how every decision a Justicar makes is decided by the code they are bound to. They aren't forced to follow it by any threat of punishment, but rather that their very order exists around this code. To be a Justicar is to follow it without hesitation or exception. The thing is, everything you learn here is about Justicars as an order. They know absolutely nothing about her as a person. You even get this line.
She's been a Justicar longer than 3 of your lifespans. Whoever she was before she swore that oath, that person is dead.
Which I'm going to come back to later. This means that they simultaneously build her up extensively, while also leaving her incredibly mysterious. And this is all done so efficiently that she is still able to appear right at the start of her recruitment mission. The pacing here is phenomenal. This is what I mean about her story being good because of all the small decisions. It's incredibly easy to overlook all these little things when they really were precise, intentional design. Now, let's talk about Justicars real quick. They're a very cool idea, but they're not original. Samara's a paladin, a warrior dedicated to their cause above all else. BioWare took this classic archetype from the fantasy genre and flawlessly integrated it into their science fiction game. It makes sense. Before Mass Effect, they did Baldur's Gate 1 and 2, and this modern understanding of what a paladin is comes from Dungeons & Dragons. And to contrast her is Morinth. As Samara is a paladin, Morinth is a succubus. She uses her powers to influence the minds of others and seduce them. She gains ecstasy and power from sleeping with people and draining their life force. And even this, they manage to believably convert into a science fiction counterpart. Though it is certainly soft sci-fi. Mind control was already established as something multiple beings could do in the first game, so her ability makes perfect sense in universe. Asari's linking their minds to others is also established in the first game, so if we accept that, it's not a reach to assume that a genetic condition could make it go awry. If these elements of mind control and telepathy were introduced alongside Morinth, it would feel absurd. But because they were introduced in a prior game in ways that felt more grounded, it gave BioWare a foundation to really push it in Mass Effect 2. It works great! This Paladin vs. Succubus story absolutely sticks the landing. Oh man, okay, that was quite a tangent, sorry. Anyways, Samara's introductory cutscene is also great. She comes off as fearsome and ruthless, yet elegant.
Those were my best troops!
Tell me what I need to know, and I will be gone from here. Where did you send her?
You think I'd betray her? She would hurt me in ways you can't imagine.
The name of the ship. Your life hangs on the answer, Lieutenant.
You can kill me, but one of us will take you down, Justicar!
What was the name of the ship she left on?
Go to hell!
Find peace in the embrace of the goddess.
You introduce yourselves and you invite her to join you, but she can't because she's hunting a fugitive. At first, she seems exactly as everyone described her, cold and ruthless. But her actions here actually say a lot about her when you look at them in retrospect. Detective Anaya is ordered to detain Samara, and Samara indicates that she's going to do exactly as her code tells her. Play along for a day, and then shoot her way out if the cops still try to hold her. This is exactly the kind of thing that everyone feared would happen. She seems to be just as detached and merciless as they said. But then she does this.
I see a way. While I am in custody, you find the name of that ship. Do that, and I will join you. Then the code will be satisfied.
A moment ago, you refused to give up your investigation, but now you'll swear to follow me?
If I stay, I will be compelled to kill many innocents to escape incarceration.
Like me.
I may be killed, and my quarry would be free to continue murdering. If I come with you and survive your mission, I can resume my investigation. To do that, I need the ship's name to track her to her next hiding place. It is a simple choice.
I think people really overlook this moment. She finds a loophole. She obeys the letter of the code, but very clearly breaks the spirit. One of the very first things we see her do is work around her code. After all that buildup about Justicars, we get a glimpse of Samara the person. And that dichotomy is where a lot of her depth comes from. Samara the Justicar versus Samara the person. Anyways, at this point, Samara goes with Anaya and you go off to kill a bunch of Eclipse marks. I feel the murder investigation aspect of the story really does not gel with Mass Effect's shoot a bunch of random dudes gameplay, but the mission has Niftu Cal, so overall 12 out of 10.
Fear me!
You get the information to her and she agrees to follow you, swearing an oath that has your orders supersede the code while she's in your service. Which makes sense. Nobody would like a companion that turns their gun on you the second you pick a renegade option. I do appreciate that she makes it clear that she will still kill you afterwards if you behave dishonorably. Though she'll never actually turn against you in the games, the threat of it prevents her oath to you from completely deflating the tension around her merciless code. Once she's on your ship, you can speak with her as you can every other squad mate. And one thing I find really interesting is that even though she won't tell you about the fugitive she's chasing, she does let you know that it is incredibly personal to her. The easy route here would have been to have it seem like she is completely devoid of emotions and personality at first, and then surprise surprise, it's actually her daughter and she's really a person under there. I don't think this would have been a bad story, but it would have been unremarkable. Instead, it's clear right out the gate that she is a person. She doesn't pretend that she isn't. Once her loyalty mission is available, she asks you for help hunting down Morinth, as she's finally figured out her location. Since she is sworn to you, she can't just go and take care of this herself. She needs you on board. I like how it's not that she asks for your help because she can't handle it herself, but rather it's a matter of favors and oaths. She agreed not to do this until the mission is done, but she's asking for your permission to go and do this now, and for your help since you're already working together. Some other loyalty missions really have a "Shepard, help, I don't know what to do" vibe. There's a lot of great nuances in this cutscene. I like that she only tells you that the fugitive is her daughter at the very end of the conversation as you're starting to leave. It really sells that this is something that she hates talking about, but has to, since you're now properly involved. The acting here is great. It really does feel like she is distressed, but doing everything in her power to maintain her calm and focused demeanor.
I gave up all that I possessed. I own nothing, claim nothing. All my knowledge will die with me. Now my purpose is to destroy my own children.
Maggie Bear does an awesome job with Samara, not just here, but across the board. She's also Billie Eilish's mother, fun fact. For her loyalty mission, you go to Omega, and rather than the standard shooting gallery, this mission is entirely focused around dialogue. They could have taken the easy path and just had you fight some cult dedicated to Morinth, but again, they do something much more interesting rather than cruising down Easy Street. It's one of my favorite loyalty missions. The opening investigation into Morinth's latest victim does a good job showing how sadistic she is. And then the section in the club, where you need to strut your stuff, is great with a bunch of fun interactions. They really put a lot of work into this single section. You will not see everything here in a single playthrough. And then you meet her, Morinth, and this is the weakest part of the mission. I think it's a bit too easy to get all the right options. You learn all her interests by interacting with items that are all clumped together, and the guy who tells you her favorite band stands right at the entrance of the club. I wish you had to put in more work to get these perfect answers, and if you didn't find them, you have to trust your gut on what to say. In this conversation, Morinth comes across as kind of...
cringe. There's no other word for it. This makes me cringe. It's embarrassing.
She feels like a try-hard poser instead of an actual punk rebel. And then, once you get to her apartment, she keeps making these laughably on-the-nose, ominous comments. Normally I'd say this is just a very poorly written section, but I actually think the clunkiness works. Morinth escaped when she was the Asari equivalent of a young teenager, and she's been a serial killer ever since. For 400 years she's been on the run, seducing and killing tons of people. And she doesn't need to use wits or charisma to get these folks into bed with her. She is straight up able to mind control them. Do you think that a serial killing sex offender who can brainwash people that has been active since they were a teenager would be a well-adjusted person? No! They're going to act like a cringy teen because they never matured past that. They're going to make these on-the-nose ominous comments because they know that they can be incredibly overt and still make you dance to their tune. She never matured or developed real people skills because she never had to. She is a self-centered, immature monster. And I really like that her reasoning is straight up bullshit. She gives all kinds of excuses and explanations for what she does, but none of it is the actual truth. She just likes killing. However, would it have been better to give her more depth and make her reasoning understandable? Samara says that her story is tragic, but she's not a sympathetic figure. What if she was? Well, then Samara wouldn't work as well as she does. She tells you right out the gate that the reason she became a Justicar was to hunt down Morinth. But when you actually think about it, that doesn't make any sense. She already had combat experience and could have gotten further training in numerous other ways. It didn't give her more resources, it took them away since she had to surrender her belongings, and it bound her to a strict code. How does any of this actually help her hunt and kill somebody? The thing is, she still loves Morinth a lot. She makes it clear how horribly difficult this entire affair is for her. She wanted nothing more than to settle down and live a comfortable life with a normal family. Learning of her daughter's conditions and having it all fall apart was traumatic for her. Samara the person does not have what it takes to stop Morinth, but she felt responsible and couldn't just leave it to the authorities. The fact that the Ardat Yakshi condition is recessive means that Samara had to have passed along those genes. Reasonably, she did absolutely nothing wrong, but technically, she was the cause. It makes sense that she would feel an extreme amount of guilt and responsibility, that she would believe that she has to do something. But how does Samara reconcile the fact that she feels like she needs to do something about Morinth with the fact that she doesn't have it in her to kill her own daughter? Well, if she were to, say, bind herself to a code that dictates her actions, which gives incredibly specific instructions on how to exterminate the exact kind of monster that her daughter became, it would be a lot easier. Samara became a Justicar because the code was exactly what she needed to force her hand, something that would prevent her from hesitating. In her fight with Morinth, she acts incredibly cold and ruthless. She shows significantly less emotion here than she does in the lead-up and aftermath to the confrontation. What is the last thing that Samara says to her daughter before killing her? The last chance she would ever have to express sympathy, love, or regret.
Find peace in the embrace of the goddess.
It's the exact same impersonal send-off that she gave to this unnamed Eclipse Lieutenant. She became a Justicar so that she could disassociate when facing Morinth, so that Samara, the mother who loved her daughters, could go to sleep, while Samara the Justicar takes care of business exactly as her code tells her to. This is why she's so willing to push the code aside when you meet her. She's only so invested in being a Justicar. She didn't become one because she wanted to be a galaxy-traveling hero. She became one because it would apply pressure in a very specific spot. She of course can't break the code though. If she ever actually disobeyed, then the dam would burst and she would be tempted to break it again for her daughter. She cares little for the spirit, but desperately needs the letter. This is why I'm not convinced that adding nuance to Morinth is the right call. If she wasn't such a monster, if she was redeemable, then Samara's actions would make a lot less sense. It would be bizarre for her to take the path where she forces herself to kill her daughter when she would absolutely prefer that Morinth be saved. You could change her reasoning for becoming a Justicar, but that's the tentpole of her entire character. She'd basically just be somebody else at that point. Morinth is evil. Samara's loyalty mission makes that clear, and the game makes it clear as well if you recruit her. She doesn't show remorse or take responsibility. She makes excuses and manipulates you in the hopes of seducing and killing you. The fact that recruiting her is so unrewarding works because it's the game going, yeah, you made the wrong call. Morinth really is that bad. It hammers home that Samara's daughter is the bad guy. Duh. Though, I will say that I liked when she did this.
Look into my eyes and tell me you'll subscribe. Tell me you'll like and comment anything I want.
Anyways, the Justicar code is quite comparable to something from another BioWare game, Dragon Age's Qun. It is a strict set of tenets that all Qunari follow. It defines how they live their life, how their society works, gender roles, everything. The Qunari are a very interesting group, but generally speaking, they're antagonists. While you could debate on if they're villains, the Qun and its guidance are something that get in your way. Even in Dragon Age Origins, where the only Qunari you meet is a companion, the Qun is why he was driven to kill innocent people. The Qun is cruel, spirit-crushing, and dangerous. So it's really interesting to see something so similar be beneficial in Mass Effect. It gives Samara the purpose and drive to stop a person who needed to be put down. This perspective would shift immensely if Morinth was redeemable. Overall, Samara is content. She does not regret following her code, and it doesn't snuff out her personality the way the Qun does. She still has her opinions, her likes and dislikes, things she finds entertaining. The Justicar code is overall good for her, until she comes to a complete impasse with it in Mass Effect 3. In Mass Effect 2, Samara mentions that Ardat-Yakshi are required to live in a secluded monastery to prevent them from, well, doing exactly what Morinth did. In Mass Effect 3, you go to that monastery and run into Samara. This mission is the introduction of the Banshee enemy, which are terrifying from both a design and gameplay perspective. There's a few retcons here. In Mass Effect 2, it's implied that this monastery is on Thessia, but in 3, it's on Lessus. That barely matters though. The big retcon is the amount of Ardat-Yakshi. In 2, Samara states that there are only 3 in existence, her daughters. But in Mass Effect 3, there's a bunch! And don't try and say, oh, well in 2 she says she only knows of 3. No, she knew about the monastery. This is a retcon. But I think it's for the best. Frankly, the idea that there's only 3 in the galaxy and they are all her children is stupid. They could have easily made this work by letting you acknowledge it in Mass Effect 3 and having Samara go, yeah, sorry, I lied. Like I said, they're a big secret, so I downplayed their existence. But overall, I think this is a prime example of a good retcon. Changing a minor detail that was stupid so you can do something more interesting. Anyways, it's here that Samara really gets into conflict with her code. She comes to the monastery to save her daughters after it was set upon by Reapers. However, the reason that you go is to destroy it as a favor to Asari High Command. Even if you're playing as a Paragon Shepherd, your goal is to destroy the place, since by the time you get there, it's a lost cause filled with these things. But Samara refuses to let that happen until she finds her daughters. She claims it's because of the code, but we know for a fact that that is not the real reason. In this mission, you're acting as the pragmatic force of destruction, while Samara is trying to save people she cares about. You meet her daughter Falaire, who pleads with you to save her sister Rila. She rushes ahead to the Great Hall where Rila was taken, and conveniently, where the explosives you're after are located, so it's a matter of fighting your way to the heart of the monastery. Rila, however, has already begun the process of turning into a banshee, and thus is beyond saving. In a moment of lucidity, she tells you to go and activates the explosives herself, taking out the Reaper forces. It's in this ending cutscene back on the balcony where we see Samara the mother and Samara the Justicar come into conflict. The code has a clear directive for her: kill Falaire. Where before the code forcing her to kill her daughter was a blessing, a way for her to accomplish what needed to be done, now it's a problem. She does not want to kill Falaire, but she didn't want to kill Morinth either. There is no external force binding her to the code. If Samara simply let her daughter leave, nobody would punish her. She could simply keep it a secret as she goes back to being a totally dedicated Justicar. The reason she can't do that is that the code was the only thing that gave her the resolve to kill Morinth. It let her compartmentalize and justify it. It gave her no other option, and it meant that she was able to stop her, once and for all. The part of the code that she depended on wholeheartedly is now the exact section telling her to execute her innocent child. If she simply refused to follow it, then her entire existence as a Justicar shatters into pieces. She cannot let Falaire go without completely and totally accepting responsibility for killing Morinth. It would be moving the blood off of the pages of the code and onto her hands. So, at this impasse, she goes for the only solution she can see. She's going to take her own life so that she is incapable of enforcing the code. You can let her go through with it, but there's really no reason to. It benefits absolutely nobody. I think the fact that she is so ready to pull the trigger, but seems actually shocked that you stop her, hints that she had already accepted that this would need to happen. I think that she realized when she was coming in that this may be the only way for her to spare her daughters. Your presence here was unexpected, so she didn't account for you disarming her. I like how her demeanor immediately shifts. She's at peace as she goes to take her own life, but is instantly very emotional when you don't let her. It's clear that this is immensely difficult for her, and it's her daughter who actually finds a solution.
Falaire? I'll stay here.
Home. No matter what's become of it.
Without a proper monastery,
I could have left any time. I don't need a building to honor my own code. And if the Reapers return, they won't take me alive. I promise.
then the code permits you to stay, as you are.
Remember that line I said I'd come back to, like 20 minutes ago?
Whoever she was before she swore that oath, that person is dead.
Samara needed to push down who she was so that she could handle Morinth, but this scene makes it clear, more than any other, that the person she used to be isn't dead, not by a long shot. This is another instance of Samara following the letter of the code and ignoring the spirit, but now the matter directly involves her daughter. This is Samara accepting a piece of responsibility, letting her own personhood seep into the matters that she once heavily depersonalized to get through. It's a small step, but it's one that's very difficult for her. It's growth in a person who's forced themselves to remain stagnant for centuries. I've seen some people say that they don't like this, that Samara should have simply broken her code and that would have been a good conclusion to her arc. But I disagree, for a few reasons. I hate the trope of somebody has been wholly dedicated to something for a huge chunk of their life, but they leave it behind after a relatively tiny amount of time with the protagonist. It just makes it seem like they put no thought into what they were completely invested in. If Samara broke the code just like that, it would undercut everything established about her and make her motives way muddier. It would be jumping to the finish line before even making it halfway along the course. I think it's a perfectly written baby step. Samara's story takes place over multiple human lifespans. It makes sense that you only get to see a part of it, a small curve on a larger arc. Her story is not finished, but our involvement in it is. Overall, it's a beautiful tragedy about a woman drowning in guilt and clinging to her code as a life raft. Somebody who has only ever wanted to do right, but needed to depend on ancient teachings to determine what that was. She still appears a couple times after this in Mass Effect 3, with a lot of good scenes in the Citadel DLC, but none of those tie back into her story with her daughter. She is a person who compartmentalizes a lot, so it makes sense that you could spend quite a bit of time with her, and these major aspects of her life just never come up. There's still a bunch of other small aspects to her that I think work to support and build on top of her very strong core narrative. However, there's also a few missteps. These are all tiny complaints, nitpicks really, but I just can't help myself. First, what is this outfit? Mass Effect 2 was way too into over-sexualizing its female characters, but at least with Jack and Miranda, it made some sense from a character perspective. This outfit is such a horrible mismatch with her personality. It's not even attractive either, it looks like an unripe strawberry. I think a light and sleek design would be fine, but the sluttiness is just stupid. It's also weird that you can't even ask about her bondmate, the other parent to the daughters around which Samara's entire story is built. The Shadowbroker DLC indicates that she is dead, so it'd be one thing if Samara didn't want to reopen old wounds, but it feels like the game basically ignores her existence entirely. We know nothing about her. Okay, this is probably the most annoying thing about Samara overall, the way this specific cutscene is done. Rila says goodbye to Falere and tells you to go. Falere isn't willing to leave her sister, so you drag her with you as enemies begin to pour in. Samara doesn't say goodbye to Rila, and she just runs towards the elevator while you drag Falere. It's just so lazy. I get that it's a lot of work to make distinct cutscenes based on who's alive and who's dead, but come on. They could have so easily replaced Shepard with Samara in this animation. Last, and absolutely least, how did Samara get to the Ardakshi Monastery? Well, she took a sky car. Even if we accept that this car is capable of traveling faster than light, since the monastery isn't in the same system as the mass relay, whose car is it? We know that Samara is not allowed to own a car. She travels by hitching rides, says that she can't own anything other than weapons and armor, and in the Shadowbroker files, we see that one of the possessions she surrenders when becoming a Justicar is her sky car! We know with absolute certainty that she can't own a car. And we know that this isn't her going and borrowing her old one, since it's a different model. How did she get this car? Do we even want to know? Did she kill somebody for speeding and take their ride halfway across the galaxy? Okay, that's enough. Now, let's get to those other great examples of writing and interesting aspects of her character that I have not had a good chance to bring up yet. For example, I like that she's actually quite intelligent. It's very common for Earthbound characters to be portrayed as rather stupid. Hell, most people who have played D&D have had an encounter with a lawful stupid paladin player. It's tough to make a character be both smart and willing to prioritize strict tenets over common sense. Yet Samara hits that sweet spot. She's clever. As I've established, she is willing to outwit the code when it conflicts with what she believes is right. And in the collector base, if you don't suggest using the biotic field, she will. Alongside that, she's also book smart. She researched various races, including humans, extensively as preparation for leaving Asari space. The only other squad mate who's lived a comparable lifespan is Rex, but Samara had the benefit of getting a proper education. I think it's pretty reasonable to say that she is one of the most intelligent squad mates in the series. I also appreciate that despite her story being a guilt-driven tragedy, she isn't edgy. Obviously she's miserable whenever the whole killing her children thing comes up, but generally, she's a rather upbeat character, despite her stoicism. She makes it clear that she likes adventuring and getting into fights. She has a good time telling you about her escapades. Her story about Nihilus is a really great example of this. She looks back on the chase fondly, enjoying the game of cat and mouse that they had, and she respects that he used her code against her to escape her grasp. The Citadel DLC leans into this aspect of her character to great effect. She doesn't get flanderized into a silly goofball or a no-fun grouch. It does a good job capturing the feel of your conversations with her from Mass Effect 2. And speaking of the Citadel DLC, the fact that she speaks at Thane's funeral is a great touch. Thane is somebody who the code would have had her kill under most circumstances, but she didn't look at him as an assassin. She looked at him as a father, one who stepped in and saved his son from a life of crime. It makes sense that as a mother who was unable to do the same, this would resonate deeply with her. And can I just say how great it is to have a character that has others hype up how deadly and strong they are, make a badass entrance, and then actually be good in the game? Her assault rifle gives her consistent, well-rounded damage, and Reeve functions as a do-everything ability, which her AI is happy to spam. She's genuinely a useful character to have on your team. She isn't Miranda levels of overpowered, but she's good. The character hyped up as a badass is actually a badass! And finally, something I have intentionally avoided mentioning until now, her romance. It's incredibly unique in that it's a fully fleshed out failure. She's not the only character who Shepard can try and fail to romance, but it's the only one that has real depth to it. I wouldn't necessarily say that I recommend actually taking this path in a playthrough, since I think it's more satisfying to do one of the proper romances, but it's still a really interesting storyline to analyze. There's actually quite a bit of content here. You can start flirting with her pretty early, and she'll say that she isn't looking for romance, but does appreciate your interest. I really like this. Samara made it clear that what she wanted more than anything was to settle down and start a family, but then it all fell apart in the worst ways possible. It's not that she doesn't want romance, rather, she feels that it's simply incompatible with who she is now. What's also cool is that rather than it being a general, this NPC is attracted to the player character, there's layers to the attraction. She only likes Paragon Shepards. She has absolutely zero interest in a renegade. After she says that she's not interested in a relationship, you can suggest casual sex. She makes it clear that she does find you very attractive, but that's just not her style. Anymore. It would have been easy for her to have a sort of general attraction and give a blanket rejection, but instead there's all this subtle depth. If you're a Paragon and pick the specific dialogue to pursue a romantic relationship, you get a continuation in the Citadel DLC. It's a really sweet scene of Samara giving into guilty pleasure, allowing her to take a moment for herself in this collapsing galaxy. She generally seems unperturbed by the Reaper's arrival. I mean, she's not even shaken by banshees, despite the fact that she has the genetics needed for the Reapers to turn her into one. But here she shows that it is getting to her. I've said before that even if your Shepard doesn't see a specific aspect of a character in a playthrough, the fact that it exists at all shapes how you, the player, look at the character. Samara's romance is a good example of this. It reveals a lot about her even if you don't go down that path in your playthrough. The biggest criticism of this route, and another reason I don't necessarily recommend canonizing it in a playthrough, is that you have to be really pushy to properly romance her. I get the idea. She's got a tough exterior, follows a strict code, and has made it explicitly clear that she does reciprocate your feelings. It's supposed to represent you giving her a push to follow what she wants, rather than what she thinks she's supposed to do. But like, she straight up asks you to back off, and you have to ignore it. It's pretty uncomfortable. They didn't really execute this specific piece well, but otherwise, it's genuinely a really compelling story. But hey, that's Samara in a nutshell. Compelling. She has so much care and attention put into her story that it really gets you invested. It takes classic archetypes like paladins and succubi, gives them a sci-fi twist, and uses them brilliantly. Now, this video had a stronger focus on my personal interpretation of the story when compared to my other character analyses. So, if you disagreed with me on any of this, let me know. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Thanks for watching, folks. Thank you to all my patrons, and an extra special thank you to Audie T, Amy Lech, Ilya Kukushkin, Legitimate Salvage, and Samuel Wagner.